experience that it was just a joy. And I'm sure you are going to enjoy it as well. I think one of the things that we started with was the idea that we wanted to work something about contemporary politics. And the summer school took place at a time when there was a rerun election in Istanbul. So we thought, okay, this is a hot topic that we are both interested in, everybody is interested in our group. So let's roll with that. And then comes this paper a year later with the title, Same Terms, Adverse Opinions, Assessing Competing Understandings of Democracy in Contemporary Turkey. As you can see from our names and affiliations, we came from all around the place. We didn't know each other, but we were able to build a solid common ground to get the project started. So how we started was basically, as I said before, we met these awesome people and we were just in the middle of the action in Istanbul at a really interesting time to study politics, you know, like the Chinese proverb, may you live in interesting times. So with that spirit in mind, we decided to start with the research question. So this is us being nerdy at our weekend. We were starting to think about the research question at the weekend during our off time. And the initial research question we had for this project was, within the discursive field, does the positioning of the political readers alter the election results? So this is like a very broad research question that we started with. And then as we sat down and analyzed the data and then wrote a draft and then rewrote a draft, rerun the analysis, the research question turned into something else. Yeah, so this is our slightly different research question that the paper shaped itself into. And basically the question is, how do the meanings attached to democracy in online platforms reflect political polarization in a context where the very existence of democracy is seen to be in peril? So all the participants in this, a lot of the participants in this kind of discursive field where they were trying to discuss democracy, elections, and the results, they were basically seeing that the democracy itself was in danger. So this was a very kind of a unique moment in which to analyze democratic understandings. Right, so with this in mind, we decided to dream big, and all of us were working in different projects, some related to Turkish politics already. So we decided to utilize these data sets in order to gather a comprehensive data set of tweets that will give us a solid understanding of different sides and different positionalities in the debates. Okay, one thing to keep in mind is when you are brainstorming, you should really have some spare paper with you so that you don't really steal other people's name tags. But this is how our initial brainstorming come into fruition in terms of combining different data sets we have. Right, and the data collection part was basically putting these kind of Twitter accounts together from different data sets. And thanks to Mati's help, we were able to get approximately 100,000 tweets. And then after collecting this data, we decided to, using a mixed methods approach, to use qualitative and computational methods in order to juxtapose each of the approaches' advantages in order to have a full picture based on our research questions. So what we did is put together a few data sets. So the first one came from a project that I worked on back in 2014, where we collected random Twitter users whose language was Turkish. And we were able to have this kind of list of people who were active back then in order to have a randomized sample. Because right now, because of the restrictions of Twitter, we would not be able to get that such a like a random balanced sample anymore. Then there was Mustafa's data set where he already had a list of popular columnists who were active on Twitter. And then there was Meltem's data set. The composition of which was based on the Twitter users who were active and actively talking about elections that happened in March. So basically, we combined all these different political actors and then weighed them against each other. We also included a different data set where we looked at social movement organizations and civil society organizations that were also talking about politics. So it was a very kind of a well-balanced, if you will, data set to study political discourse on Twitter. So we found that there were two competing sides because it was an already polarized election. But interestingly, they were using the same words in order to make their position perhaps more dominant. And it is interesting because when we study political polarization in sociology or in political science, we tend to emphasize how different people try to find an edge by slightly redefining certain concepts, coming up with new understandings or new definitions, and therefore new words in order to make their positions distinct from one another. But what we saw in this particular case was that these people, these two different sides, were using the same words, but they were trying to load it with different meanings in order to compete against each other. And democracy was one of them. So we focused on three different concepts, three different words, in order to analyze these kind of positionalities and how we can understand this political polarization at a time when democracy is in peril based on perceptions of the users. So democracy, elections, and public service are going to be the three kind of tenets of our analysis. With this in mind, with this kind of particular intervention in the literature in mind, we decided to look at both the social kind of connections between users and between these two different sides, but also the cultural meanings attached to it, and it's not a very easy task to do because we have a certain network, right? And we have certain themes and topics, and then we have to understand how kind of meanings were differently attached to one another. So in order to kind of put these different puzzle pieces together, we use an analysis of NCA. It's based off a social network analysis that looks at hashtag co-occurrence networks. And then once we had that network, we also looked at how these networks were kind of looking at certain topics by using structural topic modeling, which we learned in the summer school, yay. And then finally, in order to understand the cultural kind of meanings attached to them, we basically dug deeper and then looked at the qualitative composition of these understandings. So with this kind of framework in place, I'm going to pass the ball to Meltem.
Thanks, Didem. I think I'm going to get back to the, could you go back to the previous slide? One more, please. No, okay, no, next one, sorry. Okay, so, well, I mean, I think like while Didem was presenting all the, you know, the name tag and all the, you know, what we are planning to do, all this kind of stuff, actually it was like, we are presenting the end results over here, but I'll say this clear that the steps of coming to this result is kind of messy. Like it is not going to be straightforward. So based on what Matti like asked us about, is like what lessons we've learned throughout this process. Before I go back to these results, I just because like I'll be saying it's like, oh, we did this hashtag co-occurrence network, whatever, right? But just please keep in mind that like first, distributing to workload is really important, and second, if you already know how to use a collaborative code sharing platform such as GitHub, try to do that. It is going to help you a lot. Yeah, good question. So I'll explain that. Thanks, Bilal. So as Didem said, we used a couple of mixed methods, and there were a number of reasons for that. So as Didem said, we had a list of users coming from different data sets, randomized or completely used, and we collected the last 1,000 tweets that these Twitter users posted. So some of them were directly related to the elections, mainly because we looked at the time period that the Istanbul local elections happened, and it was in June while we were at the summer school. But of course, some of them weren't. So while we were looking at the data set, we were kind of recognizing that there was some like noise. Of course. Sorry, I'm just looking at the questions at the same time. Maybe I shouldn't be doing that, but anyways.
You can follow the questions at the end of the presentation. It's all up to you.
That's totally fine. I think it's better to just like, I think like, if I can talk about that right now, I will try to do that.
Yeah, it's up to you.
Okay, thanks. So yeah, based on this noisiness, we wanted to look at the data set from different approaches, right? So one of the things that we did was to look at the hashtag co-occurrence network. I think Onur Varol showed a tiny bit of that in his presentation. I wasn't able to join, but I looked at his GitHub repository, so I saw a couple of like hashtag network, co-occurrence network kind of thing. So first we collected the first 1,000 tweets, and then we filtered for Turkish language, asking to answer Brock's question. And I think this is the kind of like analysis we did. And looking at the tags is useful, mainly because it is basically the users themselves putting a topic to that, right? It's like, so it was like kind of an easy way to just look at the whole data set a little bit clearly. So the lines are added afterwards. Like, so we created the network first. For that, I remember using iGraph package. And we did some like recoding. So obviously we, it was a tweet to hashtags data set. So it is a two-mode network in that regard. So the tweets on the one mode and hashtags on the other. So we converted that to an overlap network, meaning that like if one hashtag is shared with other tweets and what percentage of them is like shared with the others. So based on that, what we are seeing is that the ones on the left-hand side are not necessarily relevant to the election based on the noisiness that I mentioned. On the top, what we are seeing is the hashtags, either slogans or topics that are more related to the main ruling party, and the ones at the bottom are more related to the main opposition party. So you're kind of able to see this like distinction between the two parties. The second thing we did, and it was mostly Mustafa who was doing that, is to look at the structural topic modeling based on, so it basically creates a Word document matrix. This is what we do. And then based on the Word document matrix, looking at which words are associated with which tweets, we basically try to identify a given number of topics and try to see whether they're like significant topics that we can see in this data set. The words are a bit small, but mainly again, we saw this like noisiness of the data. Again, like some topics were not related to the election at all, and some topics were, but we ended up recognizing that maybe it would be useful to go more in depth in order to understand what's actually going on within these topics. And therefore, we, in the next slide, Didem, could you move on to the next slide, please? Or Doruk, I guess. Doruk, are you there?
Small issue.
That's okay. So until that happens, I think like what we did was to like try to like go more in detail with the qualitative reading. So in order to do that, we use multiple correspondence analysis, which kind of allows you, like, it is quite different from the structural topic modeling in the sense that what you're actually visualizing might be considered similar to hashtag co-occurrence network. But basically what we did was to identify individuals and the words that they use in their tweets and try to put it on a two-dimensional map.
Maybe we can go over some questions if you.
In the meantime, yeah, sure, let's do that.
By the way, my internet was bad for a moment, so I went to mobile network. So if you said something like next slide, previous slide,
yeah,
I couldn't hear you for a minute.
Okay.
Now we can continue. So mobile is good. One lesson from Corona.
I think it would help if you could stop sharing your screen, if you can, from the...
So you'll take, yeah, that's...
Yeah, I'll take it over.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. Share screen. Yep. Okay. All right. So, can you see the screen now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So, as I said, what we did was to look at the multiple correspondence analysis, and this is kind of allowing us to look at the themes that Didem mentioned about, like the election theme, democracy theme, and service theme more in detail. So what we do here is to take our data and look for the words, look for the tweets that are related to the election by searching for the term election. And this is, we are doing this because we want to kind of limit the number of words that we have first, and also try to understand different themes and what are being discussed within these themes. So we filtered that, and then we created this like kind of a matrix that shows which words are in which tweets, which is some kind of a term document matrix again. But we use that data in order to show which individual is located on this map and which words these individuals are using. So the color codes over here are basically showing that what, like the blue ones are pre-election tweets, the tweets that were tweeted before the election happened, and the purple ones are showing the after election part. And in both election and democracy themes, actually, we are able to see this like big distinction, and each dot represents one user. So we also looked across like whether the political figures or civil society organizations are talking about different things as well, but we didn't find any significant difference, and therefore we wanted to go with the pre and post-election themes. So with the election theme, like when we look at the top first and second quadrants, like the one with the positive Y values, right? And the dimensions are not actually, I mean, the dimensions are something that you end up identifying what they're about based on how the words are basically distributed. And in this data set, we saw these like terms, ballot box, town election board, envelope, screen, which made us realize that, okay, this is going to be about people's concerns about whether the elections are legitimate, whether the ballots are legitimate, whether there are any stolen votes and whatnot. So identifying these terms was useful in order to go into the qualitative reading faster than usual, which means that we were able to like identify the themes first and then go through the tweets one by one. Given that we have so many tweets, it would take way more time to go through the qualitative analysis otherwise. So yeah, we also, as we go to the qualitative reading, we also saw these discussions were not only limited to data availability, like whether the news agencies are sharing the information on time or not, or the votes, but it's actually extended to a wide range of issues, such as whether the sealed ballots were considered as legitimate, whether the ballots are miscounted and such. So basically, this is a method that allows us to do the qualitative analysis, a little bit more kind of like coding it faster. So we are kind of combining computational and qualitative methods together. So in the democracy theme, you saw a couple other words. So on this time the pre-election and post-election are divided in like the x-axis rather than and the x-axis, yeah, rather than the y-axis. And in the pre-election, again, we are seeing things related to voting. But after the election is over, we are usually seeing things about winning, decisions, success. But given that these are all combined with the term democracy, we are basically seeing that these terms are used together with democracy, which shows that this election is not only perceived as an election, but also a battle for democracy, especially on the side of the main opposition party, but it was also applicable to the ruling party itself. So yeah, I mean, I can go more into the details of questions about how we use this methods and whatnot, but for now, I think I will turn to Doruk, let us turn to Doruk, and he will, I guess, talk more about what we did during the summer school and how we progressed from then on.
Yeah, maybe we can continue with your screen.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I will go with the softer part, not with the technical part. Well, I especially wanted to put photos from our first week, and maybe this will make you a bit jealous because we were able to meet physically and there wasn't any corona. But I think that helps us a lot to learn the new tools, and these new tools in computational social science, they are endless. So like we cannot learn all of them in a single week, but it's a good introduction to these tools. And the second thing that I liked is the study group. So you have a chance to meet with a lot of other people. So you are not stuck with the same 2-3 persons for the first week. And as you can see from these photos, we are working with different people. So the first week was more focused on making first contacts. And maybe we can go to the next slide. And the second week, and I understand that you are in the second week as well.
Yeah.
It's mostly the focused research group. So like we found each other, the others, Didem, Meltem, Mustafa, they already had worked on Twitter with some political data, and we got along well in the first week. So they invited me to work with them. And that's first start in the second week was, I think, also crucial because we were working 5 days, 8 hours for the project. Probably you are doing a similar thing. And I think it was crucial to maybe like plant the seeds for the possible collaborations there. Because we are not the only group that continued with their projects, and I guess there are other presentations from other groups as well. So while saying this, thanks again to the SICSS, I cannot pronounce it, the people for organizing this. And maybe we can go one more. Meltem.
And you were multidisciplinary group. You are computer engineer, as I remember, Doruk.
Yeah, actually I'm a computer engineer graduate, but I'm doing a master's in psychology. So I went on to that field, but I'm trying to use computational methods whenever possible. And the rest of our group were sociologists. So
Sociologists, but they all have economics background, I think.
Not sure I did, but I mean, I think I also wanted to say is Doruk have been even though he says that he was there because we got along, it's not the case at all. So I don't like the way that he's underselling himself. He he was first, like as you said, he had really good coding skills, but also he was, like he's been, he helped a lot with the analysis. We were all working together a lot with the analysis and all that. So I just wanted to mention
What
that.
I mean is like they transferred me.
Oh
We
yeah,
like you. Why don't you work with us?
That's true.
Kind
Yeah.
of.
We kind of converted you. That's exact. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, yeah, smart.
And lastly, what happened afterwards? Well, we have a lot of online tools in our hands, which actually allows for this conference to be done digitally as well. And probably the groups that will continue will find their tools by themselves, but I just want to mention the ones we used. So because we continued working afterwards, the summer school as well. So maybe the most important one was Slack for us, because it allows us to use it like a forum where we post different topics, and basically we use it for our like to do things, like what to do for coding, for the data analysis, what to do with the paper writing, and who takes what responsibility for that. And we used Google Drive mostly for our data. At some point we used Dropbox, I guess, but we dropped that. I'm not sure. GitHub is very good for
Coding collaboration.
Yeah, coding collaboration. It's not necessary, but I think it's beneficial. And we were using Skype before Corona, but after Corona, Zoom got the lead. I guess they increased their stock prices by 2 or 3 times after the Corona outbreak. And for coding, well, we mainly used R. So these graphs you see, you saw, which Meltem talked about, they're from R. But I also wanted to put Python here because, especially for the pre-cleaning part, where we get rid of the like tweets by filtering with them with some dates, or getting rid of other things, or making the data appropriate for analysis, we used Python as well. So I wanted to put that too. And all these photos on the left are from the afterwards part. So they are not from the summer school. So you can see us collaborating on the Skype. You can see Meltem and Didem. I think it's from ASA conference.
American Sociological Association conference. And the other one is also like from that, like one of the get-together events. Like Mustafa was there as well.
So I guess that's all for the magazine side as well. Oh,
is that it?
Yeah, that's all.
And these are our Slack emojis. So Slack is really useful, as you can see.
Our Slack workspace is open. If you are noticed, since 2019, workspace is open. If you are aware of that.
Which one? 2020 or 2019?
2019.
Oh, well, I didn't add those to that, but if it's still active, I can add these emojis to that.
Actually, I saw some announcements and some job ads here.
Okay, I'll make sure to sign up for that as well. Thanks for letting us know.
This is the end of your presentation.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
We can go over some questions and then just discuss all about life and academics.
Of course.
Paper writing process. Maybe you can suggest some useful ideas for how to proceed with your project idea to paper writing, working paper, because we sometimes as graduate students don't know how to introduce our research ideas to a paper. There are differences between funding projects, papers, academic conferences, which idea we are focusing on would be best fit for which academic applications. You may talk about a little bit about that.
Sure. Is it okay if I answer that? Maybe Didem and Doruk can contribute to that later. Yeah, sure. So I think it really depends. I think starting from what you're actually interested in, then targeting one area is more important in my opinion, because of course, like figuring out what outlet you can like talk about that is also important, but keep in mind that if you want to continue on working on a project, you need to be interested in that, because it's not something that you can do. It's like 2-3 days and then like you're done. You should be motivated to, you should have some motivation to continue on doing that, and that's mainly your interest. Secondly, given that this is going to be a group collaboration, I always find it useful to work in groups, because like having others gives you deadline and more organization, and it's like responsibility, and that is always beneficial. And therefore I think being in touch is really important. What we were doing, especially at the very beginning of our data collection and analyses, we were meeting bi-weekly. It could be even increased to weekly sessions, depending on what you need to do, how much effort that you need to put on it. But making the meetings constant, and it's important to keep up to date, and just after the meeting setting some goals for the next meeting is really important. It's going to give you help you moving forward. And during those discussions, like what we did was to start with our interest, and then think about journals that we can send this work to, especially given that Didem is like, this is Didem's like area of research, like political sociology and social movements, like in that area. She's more knowledgeable in those outlets than anyone. We know about that. Was like Didem is the expert basically. So just knowing that is also helps you a lot, like to go make sure that which journal that you're targeting this to. And it's like knowing that at the middle process of your, like, you do the analyses, okay, this is what you find, and then let's see what we can write about this, and then like decide where to send it to is a better option in my opinion. I don't know whether, like, Didem, would you agree?
Yeah, I would agree, and maybe add a couple of things. One thing is, I think it also helps to pick the journal that would be welcoming the type of discussion that you do. So there are certain specializations, of course, and we always try to aim high, but at the same time, there are certain journals that are already having an ongoing conversation about the topics that you're interested in. And I think it's really important to be able to prioritize that. And also, if you are working perhaps in a non-US context, it's also good to remember which journals will be interested in a case study if you are doing a non-American one. That will be, I think, one thing to keep in mind. And in addition to that, I think deadlines help a lot. So we were like, I think, meeting more than once a week when we were trying to finish up the paper for a essay submission. Oh, yes. So so we had like a bigger target, and we want to have this journal, and you would like to, finish the paper, next summer. But at the same time, we had this middle point of a conference submission, which required a full paper, which I think is sane, but it's also helpful to push you in a certain direction. So it was, in the middle of the winter where we gave the biggest push and, came up with the first really kind of full draft, and then we worked on, making it more polished. So I think it's good to have a journal and a conference in mind as you are developing your paper. Doruk, you want to add?
Meltem hocam, Didem hocam, we can read questions on chat, or we can ask participants to ask directly by unmuting themselves.
I mean, I think you're the moderator, so you should decide.
I think that would be a good idea to unmute yourself if you have a question and ask directly.
There are these like reactions at the bottom. If people like can raise their hands, we can know who.
We have a small group, so you can just ask questions as
sure.
As you have. I saw Ezgi has multiple questions. Bilal, Burak. Should I read your questions, or would you like to ask directly?
If I may just, I think some of the questions were quite technical. So perhaps it's better to keep like super technical questions in the, at the back, and then prioritize with more general questions first, so that we can maximize everyone's interests.
And I guess we have a warning from Matti.
I thought it was 7 p.m. I think.
Am I wrong with my time?
I think it's at 7 p.m. Yeah, that's fine. But I'm not, maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, maybe. That was
Might be. I need to check again. I hate multi-time zone events for this reason.
Yeah.
Yeah. 7 p.m.
And also, I guess Meltem answered some of those questions during the presentation. So maybe you can talk about the unclear ones.
I mean, I can try to give one sentence answers to some of them. There are some questions about how you get tweets. We didn't collect the tweets ourselves in this process, but our tweet package in R is really useful. I'm an R person, not a Python person. There are Python packages as well, but I just don't. So our tweet package is really useful. It is super straightforward to use. There's a time, I mean, depending on how you're collecting the tweets, there are limits, rate limits and whatnot. I'm not going to go that much in detail. If you read the R tweets package, you can find that information. They're really detailed about that. Pre-processing Turkish tweets, we didn't have Turkish stop words in, like the Quentada package has some Turkish stop words. Also, you can search for some GitHub repositories for additional Turkish stop words and then add that to your dictionary. Bipartite network, I mean, yes, basically, yes, two-mode network is bipartite network. They're equivalent, they're the same thing, NS's question. The names of X, Y, and X's at MCA plot, I tried to explain, they're not names. They're basically the MCA creates too many dimensions. What you do with the maps is to take the two most meaningful dimensions. This is Ezgi's question. And there's no meaning to that. You find the meaning by looking at the words themselves based on the connections. Like so therefore, it's just the first and second dimension of think of it as an eigenvector kind of stuff. Like, so there are too many dimensions, you're just putting two of these on the plot. I'm trying not to go too much in detail to open up. We want this to be more of a conversational kind of thing. So, so yeah, if you unmute yourself, ask other questions, we will be happy to. And I think the last technical question, how did you differentiate the Twitter users as opposition or government supported? That was the qualitative part. We didn't code them in advance or use some kind of a semi-supervised method in order to code those. Those are possible things to do. Like word-to-vec methods could be useful, which is not something we did, but you might take a look at those kind of methods like word to vec, and yeah, so, but this is not what we did. We just like did it on the qualitative reading part.
Let me just like jump in on that account. Because data is very messy, there will be lots of reliability issues if you try to do it in an automated way because of the nature of the data, in our case at least. So we thought that in order to have a higher reliability score, it's better to go with the qualitative part of the story.
That's true. And also tweets are so short. It is not like IMDb comments or whatever. So I believe like those kind of methods, like bag of words methods are really useful if you have long texts, but tweets are so short. So it's just like really hard to identify these things with automated like methods. I'm sure it is possible. It's like, I'm sure like the research is growing, but it's not just like as straightforward as it would be if you were to have longer data sets. So it is a bit harder to do that for that reason as well.
I also want to make one clarification about the data collection part, maybe that may interest the participants. So like all the other people in our group, except me, they had worked with Twitter in a political context before, and they had some user lists. Like Didem had some list of NGOs, Mustafa had some list of like top journalists in the field. I guess Meltem had some people, like ordinary citizens, talking about the election in the March, because this was a rerun election. Maybe like the foreigner participants, they do not know, but that was a rerun election. So there were two elections, just one of them in March, one of them is in June. So we had a list of different type of users, and thanks to Matti's premium account, we could get a lot of tweets from those users. So that was maybe the starting point. So like you cannot go with taking random tweets from random accounts.
The sampling process is, I think, the hardest part, and it's very time consuming process. It took 2 months to get my representative sample for my master thesis. I used snowball sampling methods, and first I get 30 accounts, and then I try to find my representative sample by derivating from these users. And you were very lucky to have a ready list to go with the data collection process. I think we have a question. One more question as well. No. Did you read all of the tweets for qualitative analysis? Burak is asking, or did you select some hashtags or pro and same for opposition?
Good question. We had 116,000 tweets, so no, we didn't do that. We basically used the MCA method to filter some tweets and then look at those tweets too. And like it kind of, I think, filtered it to somewhere between 1,000 to 750 tweets or so. So it was easier to like go through and see. We also filtered it for like themes as well. So if it's election, then we searched for election related words. If it's related to democracy, we filtered for democracy related words. So this kind of allowed us to, rather than looking at the all tweets at the same time, which would require a lot more cleaning, it kind of allowed us to look at one particular top theme. We like to say theme because when we say topic, it kind of can be misunderstood with like the structural topic modeling kind of topic. It's not that, it's more like the themes. It allowed us to like filter that. So we used the computational methods to filter the data set and use the qualitative reading to make more detailed sense of it.
How have you found this?
About methods, I think, right? Whether we continue to work, whether our like work pattern in this project like influenced our work afterwards. So maybe like a very short answer to that is I've been a mixed methods person, but I've been using more like quantitative plus qualitative methods up to that point. And by using the computational methods, it kind of broadens your horizon. So I continue to use computational methods in conjunction with quantitative and qualitative methods. It's hard, but it's fun. So I recommend it.
Yeah. Kyle has a question, I think.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Thanks, you guys. Yeah, it's a really good presentation, and she kind of just answered it actually. But still, how have you found this mixed methods approach to be kind of received in general in the computational social science field, and then also within your own fields specifically?
Well, given that 3 out of 4 here is sociologists, and we are kind of converting Doruk to our side a little bit, at least trying to. Mixed methods is more, I mean, like, of course, like, there's the computational versus more qualitative camp, but I think there's a big support of mixed methods within sociology. So in that regard, we didn't see that much of a problem. But obviously I don't know, I mean, like, not obviously, but it's like, I think it would be way more different in informatics or like other fields. I think maybe in that regard, what Emre was asking at the very beginning is important. It's like, where are you going to send this? Like, who your audience is. But also, like, it is the way that you do research too, right? So it's just like, I think it's a good question. And I think it's important to know, it's like, what the field in overall thinks about the methods, like how it's being used, how, I mean, whether it focuses more on reliability, validity, or like how fast you do the analysis, or it's like improving methods. Like it's yeah, I think it's related to your audience. You're right about that.
Okay, thanks for a very interesting presentation. And Akın Hoca would like something to add if you have.
No, I just wanted for you to do this without me on your own, but it's always great to see our alumni coming in and updating us about, let me also react with a clap. So it's always good to see. How are you guys? How are you doing in general, life-wise, COVID?